Hi, so today I will be talking about how music has affected and transformed the Jewish religion, specifically how it has affected the decline of the conservative movement and the growth of the reform movement. So just to start with a little introduction. So like I said, again, the project will kind of talk about not only how music has affected the Jewish religion, but how it has more specifically affected the growth of the reform movement and then consequently affected the decline of the conservative movement today. I personally chose this topic because I had a personal interest in it. I grew up in a reform community, and it's just the music I've experienced and grown an identity with. And as I've gotten older, I've heard more about the discussion of how conservative movement has really been on the decline, and it's most likely since because of intermarriage. And I personally think that there's more to it than that. I think because in Judaism, music plays such a large role, and it's really at the root of the religion. I think that has something more to do with the decline of conservative Judaism. So just moving on. So first I'm going to talk about a little bit about the background of role in in Judaism. Music has a huge role in Judaism, whether it's in the services, in large events such as weddings or bar mitzvahs. For example, like it says here, after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, instrumental music was actually banned as a way to kind of mourn the loss of the temple. Yeah, it's part of really almost all of the holidays. It's not only prevalent in the biblical times, it's super prevalent today. It's still in most, if not all, services, and it is especially used in Jewish youth groups and summer camps in modern times today, and I'll talk a little bit on that note a little bit later. So I've been talking about Reform and Conservative, and these are sects of Judaism, so just to give a little bit of context for that, there are three main that are widely recognized, three main sects, and these are Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. For the purpose of this presentation, I'll be specifically talking about Conservative and Reform, since the Orthodox hasn't really changed because of its nature. So just to give some background on that, the Orthodox is seen as like the most religious, sticking to exactly what the Jewish biblical texts say. So they haven't really changed that much, so I didn't really need to analyze them. But the Conservative is kind of the in-between between Orthodox and Reform, while the Reform is the more liberal, adaptive kind of sect. Okay, just to give some background on the decline of conservative Judaism. So actually from 1990 to 2000, the conservative Jewish population dropped from 5%. And that might not seem kind of prevalent, but that actually is a very big deal in terms of Judaism when our religion is already kind of a minority in terms of the religions. So people have asked what caused this decline, and a lot of people have pointed to intermarriage. And while this is definitely a prevalent issue, I think it's more so has affected the entire Jewish religion than the conservative movement specifically. I mean, obviously, the Reform Judaism is more welcome to intermarried couples, and they kind of accept the fact that that you don't have to, your mother doesn't have to be Jewish in order to be considered Jewish, so that makes it a little bit more accepting. But I think that intermarriage has really affected, all of the Jewish movement. And there's also the fact that that conservative movement kind of disapproves of homosexuality because they follow so closely to the Jewish text, and they have kind of banned homosexuals from studying at rabbinical schools and holding leaderships in conservative institutions. So that obviously has deterred people away from joining the movement and supporting it, which has also led to the decline. But I really do think there's something more there, because a 5% drop is something that's really prevalent, and I think in order to analyze that drop, we have to kind of look at the history of conservative and reform Judaism through the lens of music and Judaism. So just a little bit about history of the synagogue music in America, which I personally think is kind of the beginning of the decline of conservative movement. Basically, a lot of Jews moved to the Americas after the World War II, so that kind of started the new type of music in the synagogues, and that was when the first school for cantors was established, and that was established in 1948 for reform cantors, and then the school for conservative cantors was formed in 1952, so you can already tell the kind of divide and lagging, for lack of a better word, for the conservative movement. There's some more information here, but I'm just going to keep going on. So just a little bit more history. So a big shift that happened in Jewish music in general was the use of popular music and affecting Jewish music and synagogue music, and there were obviously two very different responses for the two different sects. So Reform really kind of adapted to this music and incorporated it as part of their services. And this is when you really started to see the classic reform service of, participatory music and inviting everybody to sing along, and use the use of guitars, and incorporating American folk music was really established, while the conservative movement was kind of hesitant to incorporate this and really try to stick to the traditional ways that they were taught in the older cantorial schools. Um, in addition, while the reform movement was adding guitars, a new instrument, the conservative movement was even hesitant to use organs, while the reform movement was already replacing them. And also, the conservative movement only started ordaining female cantors in 1987, while the reform movement began doing so in 1975, already showing this decline, lagging for the conservative movement. Okay, so just to kind of analyze a musical example, I'm going to be analyzing Orza Rua, which is it's inspired by a passage from Psalms, and this specific song was written by Jeff Klepper, who is very prevalent in Reform Judaism in terms of the music scene. And when I was researching this song, I actually found it in the BBYO, which is B'nai B'rith Youth Organization songbook, and this songbook is used in the largest Jewish youth organization in America and pretty much the world. So a lot of the youth have been exposed to the song, and it's part of their tradition, and I think that's really important to look at. And this is a very good example of how they use guitar and basic chords and this melody to help encourage people to sing and play along as well as learn it themselves. And this again kind of inspires the cycle of learning songs and passing them down generations, which would help the reform movement flourish. And here are the chords, as you can see, fairly easy to play on guitar, so it would make it good for anyone to learn, and it makes it easy to play in services and things like that. Sorry, moving back, I'm just going to play a little bit of the video. And just to point out here, you also have a guitarist, a drummer, and and the man clapping over here, and you also have the words on the screen. These are all parts of like the participatory performance aspect of Reform Judaism, having people clapping along, singing along, the melody being fairly simple so they can follow along and join in. And it's the same sentence repeated over the entire song. And actually, at some point, they use lailais, which are very common in Reform music. I mean, Jewish music in general, but very, very common in Reform. So I'll try to find that part and I'll play it here. This is, again, to get everyone to sing along, especially for those who are not as comfortable with Hebrew. It makes it easy for everyone to join in.
Your turn now.
Again, like he's turning back to the audience, trying to help them.
Same thing.
And now just moving on to to a musical performance. This performance is a performance of Misha Berach, which is a healing song Judaism, and it's done by Debbie Friedman, who is an extremely prevalent American Jewish singer and songwriter in the world of all Jewish music, but more specifically Reform music. And she passed away a few years ago, and in response to that, the president of the Union of Reform Judaism said this quote about her that I feel like really summarizes the impact she had. It says, 25 years ago, North American Jews had forgotten how to sing. Debbie reminded us how to sing. She taught us how to sing. She gave us vehicles that enable us to sing. What happens in the synagogues of Reform Judaism today, the voices of song, are in large measure due to the insight, brilliance, and influence of Debbie Friedman. So, as you can see, Debbie Friedman and the artists like her have really impacted the Reform Judaism and its growth, essentially. I'm going to now skip to a part later in the song where she kind of invites the audience to sing with her.
And let us say, and let us
So basically she's speaking the words before she sings them so everyone can join in.
Misha Berach imotenu. Misha Berach imotenu. And let us say,
Yeah. It's a very good example of like a very important and powerful song in Judaism, and her tunes have been used and if not replaced with all the they have replaced all the older tunes in Reform Judaism, and her tunes have really taken over the scene in there. So yeah, that concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoyed a closer look at how music has affected and transformed the Jewish religion, and specifically helped the Reform movement grow and has affected the decline of the conservative movement. Thank you.